A couple years ago, I noticed that a lot of my introductory programming kids really get stuck on where to begin. So when we do all our little projects together, when we're learning what a for loop does, what a while loop does, what an if-else statement does, if they know which one to use, they're okay. They understand that, okay, we're doing a lesson about for loops. We're going to use a for loop for this assignment. If it's if statements, then they know not to use an if else. And so I really found that it was hard for them when we moved on to a little bit harder projects to know where to begin. And I feel like that concept that they were struggling with was decomposition, how to break down a problem. And so I think it was just overwhelming for them. They really weren't sure what parts got broken down and where they should use what type of control structure. And so we took some time away from programming and we made a flowchart on control structures and how they would know when to use what type of control structure. And so we started with just the basic question of like, what does my code need to do? Does it need to repeat multiple times or does it need to repeat just once? So that was the big overarching question that they asked first. And then that split off onto two more questions where do they know how many times does it need to repeat? Like yes, it needs to repeat, do they know how many times? And so if they knew that number, then they would want to use a for loop because they know the number of repeats. It needs to repeat 5 times. It needs to repeat 10 times. If they don't know the number, but they know their code needs to repeat, then it was a while loop. And so that flow charted out where you could see the yes and no answer to that question. And then back on the other side of this flow chart, if they knew that their code just needed to happen just once, then we pushed over to the if else side. And so we had to decide, okay, if my code happens, does it need to do something else if it's not true? And then that's where that flow chart split off to be an if else statement compared to just an if statement. And we made these flowcharts look a little fancy. We did like Lucid Charts online, the free website, so that they could have some fun for the day and they weren't programming. They got to color code them and make their flowcharts look as fancy as they want. But the best part about doing this is after they created the flowchart, they downloaded them to their desktop. And so that flowchart was always a picture they had access to. And so it was something I could reference even when we went farther along and we had been past this for a long time. If they were stuck, I could say, hey, have you thought about what questions you've asked about whether or not this needs to repeat or how it needs to repeat? And they could pull that up and it was just a quick reference. And so that was a very good thing and good reference for them to have throughout the whole semester.